We're going to start Leviticus tonight, and we're going to finish Leviticus tonight. Y'all think we can do that many chapters in one night? There's like 20-something chapters, so you think we can finish it? I think we can. I think we can do it. So let's review, because we missed a whole week, so it feels like a month ago. We finished Exodus last week ago. Where are we in the narrative? Where are we in the movie of, what's his name? Charleston Heston. What is Charleston? 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 Where are we in the Charleston Heston saga right now? What's going on? When we left Exodus, where did we leave Charlie? Where did we leave him at? He was breaking the tablets. He was mad. What did he do to that calf? Melted the golden calf. Made him drink it after he ground it up. So he has brought the people out of Egypt. They're all do y'all know what location, where in the world they are? At the base of Mount Sinai. And he went up, he's talking to God in the clouds and the lightning, and while he was gone for a few days or 40 days, then they started acting crazy. And what was our theory of the people that were the ones that were actually acting crazy? Oh, the Egyptians that went with them. So we're not taking any blame. We're going to blame it all on the Egyptians that they started it. Yeah, that's what they do today. The Jews still claim today that was the Egyptians that did the golden calf. But anyway, so Moses comes down and he's mad. He throws the tablets down and, and all that. Then he goes back up and God says, bring another set and we're going to, make a new copy. So at the end of Exodus, they have, after that, then he gives them the instructions to build something. What does God give Moses the instructions or blueprints to build? The tabernacle. And what is that? It's a portable temple. It's a tent. So all the back half of Exodus is all the blueprints and instructions on building this thing that they call, or we call, the tabernacle. And it's the size of a football field or so. And it just had curtains, and inside was the church, and I'm using, lame terms. But anyway, that's what it is. So it was a portable temple that they would move around and use, and God would use that. And in there, they had an altar, they had a bowl and a fire, and all that. And then that's where they put the ark, where Indiana Jones was after. They put the ark inside the Holy of Holies, So they had built it and erected it and had it all set up and began using it when we left them. It was at the very end of Exodus. How long had that, at that time, at the end of Exodus, do y'all remember how long they have been gone from Egypt at that point? Longer than 3 months. It was 1 year. It was basically their year anniversary. So when they were leaving Exodus, when they were leaving Egypt, when they were doing the Passover and all that, God said, this is going to be the first day of the first month. This is going to be your new year right here. And then the day that they sanctified their, what do you call it? Dedicated their tabernacle was that day a year later. So they've been gone a year. So that's where we are. Moses and all of his crew are in the desert. Now, something else happened and a bunch of people got killed. That was after the golden calf, wasn't it?
He told them to kill
somebody.
The priest. He asked who would stand with him.
Yeah. The Levites came over, and then they killed like 3,000 people. And we're not sure who. Maybe Egyptians, right? Now, Leviticus is a timeless book. It all happens within this time, okay? It's not a narrative book. Does that make sense? So we leave Exodus, we leave Charlie in the desert at 1 year. Leviticus comes along. It's just a law book. It's not a narrative. So there's no time that's going to pass. When we get to Numbers, we pick up at the 1 year mark, Okay, so numbers, they start to move. So Leviticus doesn't have a time. It's just laws. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, okay? So let me pray for us, and then we'll get started. Dear Lord, again, thank you so much for bringing us here. Thank you for letting us gather. And Lord, be with us as we read your word tonight. And we are able to look at your requirements and what is our obligation to you today? How is our relationship affected by what they knew so long ago and your rules to them and your son, and how did he play into that? And what do we do today? Lord, show us what you want and how you want us to live today. Lord, again, we thank you so much. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so we've talked about this before. So Leviticus is a law book. It's one of the laws. It's just a rule. We call it a rule. Now, all of these laws or all of these rules can be categorized into three types, and we've talked about this before. What's number one in your notes? What type of laws are concerned with justice and judgment? Do y'all remember? No, that's a different one. Justice and judgment. Ma'am? Judicial, that's close to civil. It's the moral law. This is the Ten Commandments. Moral. Justice and judgment is how you live and how you're going to be treated. So we're going to, like the Ten Commandments, that's moral law, right from wrong. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not do these things, right? Moral laws. Then, number two, we have another. Now, they're not divided in the book. They're all mixed up, But anyway, the number two is laws relating to your relationship in worshiping God. How to worship God. How to sacrifice. How to do all of those things. That is called the ceremonial law. And these are just kind of made up titles. These aren't official titles. These are just ways of looking at it. You could call it the worship laws, whatever you want. It's the law that dictates to us how God wants us to live with him. The ceremonial laws. This is the stuff about you're going to keep the Passover. You're going to once a year have the feast. You're going to do these things. Otherwise, I'm going to kill you. That's the rules. That's the ceremonial laws. Now, number three, living together, what would that be called? Civil laws. Living civilly with each other. Civilian laws. This is, if I kill my neighbor's cow, then I have to buy him a new cow 3 times, or whatever it is. This is how to get along. So there's 3 types of laws. And so whenever you're reading or studying the Old Testament, always remember that there are several, the Jews today divide up his law into, these are not something we made up. This is what they claim. There's moral, ceremonial, and civil. Okay. Now here's the deal with Israel. The Israelites, not today, that's not what we're talking about. The Israelites, from now on until the New Testament, they live by these laws. This is the law book. This is what the Pharisees memorized. This is what the Sadducees, all these people memorized. They knew it front and back. They lived with all 3 laws all the time because they lived in a nation that was governed called a theocracy. What does theo mean? God. And crazy means government, right? So theocracy is a God-run government. So who was in charge of their government? Did they have a president? Who was in charge? God. Or priest, king/priest, you see? Is our in charge guy a priest? Thank God, right? Okay. You see the difference? They had a theocracy. We live in a what kind? A democracy, demonocracy, right? Is that where that comes from? Yeah. Demonocracy. Anyway, so y'all see that? I'm making fun, but yeah, y'all see the difference. And so they lived by all 3 laws. Not only, so if I broke a law, I would literally be breaking a civil law, a ceremonial law, and a moral law, I could break all three by doing one thing. Y'all see that? If I run a red light down here by the Brookshires, I'm only going to break a civil law. Pretty easy, right? It has nothing to do with worshiping God. But when they broke a law, it was, oh my gosh, because they looked at things so much different. So that's why when Jesus is out picking grain on the Sunday or Sabbath, when Jesus is breaking the law and the Pharisees want to kill him, it's because in their mind, he's just nuts because he's broken all three laws by doing this one thing. And we're like, what's the big deal about picking grain on Sunday? But to them, he's broken a civil law because he's broken this, and I can't believe he could be the Son of God. Y'all understand? So to them, they mix together and they aren't separated in their minds. But to us, we don't live like that. You know, we could break a civil law. Sometimes you go to jail, sometimes you don't. You can make the church mad. That's breaking some religious law. It has nothing to do. Can't go to jail for doing something in church. But them, they would stone you, right? If you did something against the church, they would civilly kill you. So they were mixed together. So as we study laws or go through these pretty quickly, we have to understand that some of them are moral laws, some of them are ceremonial and civil. Now, as a Christian, which one of these laws do we still have to abide by? Do we have to abide by moral laws, or do we just do what Jesus said? Do we have to do these ceremonial laws, or do we do what Jesus said? Or do we have to follow these civil laws? Which one of these laws did Jesus do away with? Which one of these laws do we still have to follow? This is where we can get cross today. So out of 1, 2, and 3, which one do you think God would come in here and say you're still responsible for? The moral laws. So we are still obligated to the 10 Commandments. Jesus didn't say, I fulfilled the law, you can do what you want, right? He did say that, but that's not what he meant. Okay. So we are still obligated. God is the same. Morally, he has not changed. You should have the right and wrong in you that is the right and the wrong. Morally, it doesn't change. So what about the ceremonial laws? Should we still do Passover in the weeks of the Feast of Weeks and the leavened bread and the first fruits and all of the ceremonials? Do we need to have a temple and kill calves and stuff? Do we need to do all of that? Why not? You said I have to do number 1. He paid it. He paid number 2, but he didn't pay number 1. You see, it can be confusing. And then the last one is civil laws. And I didn't pick some out, but this literally says if a neighbor's ox falls in your pit on your property, you have to repay the neighbor and buy him a new ox because he fell in a hole on your property. We would have a hard time going by these civil laws. Civil laws are only applied to them in that specific circumstance in that land. You see, it has nothing to do with the United States today. Now, they have some moral good to them, but we don't have to live by them. So y'all see how that works? There's no reason for a preacher to stand up here today and preach a civil law to the church. You will never see me on Sunday morning talking about if an ox comes on your land and falls in a pit. That has no application today. See? And I will never say we need to be keeping the Feast of Weeks, or I get it, weeks of feasts or feasts of weeks, but I'm never going to say we need to do that. Okay. But I will say, thou shalt not, right? And have no other gods before him, and all the other things, not just those 10, but the moral laws. Okay. So Leviticus, I have quickly just given you an outline. Y'all see that it starts number 1, and I copied this and adjusted it and made it cleaner and easier. I did not write this. I did verify all of these, but I didn't get in depth. So the Roman numeral 1, the way to God is sacrifice. The only way they could get to God was by sacrificing something. And all of these rules, and you can go to Leviticus 1, and you can see this is very boring stuff, okay? So he talks about the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, the guilt, all of these different things and all the rules and regulations you have to do. So the offerings, what type of laws would that be? Moral, ceremonial, or civil? Ceremonial. They're useless to us. We might could gain some insight of history, but we are not obligated to do them at all. Okay? Look at B, through the priest. So they had, a go-between person. We do not have that. We don't need that. Okay, and then number 2 is walking through sanctification. So they had laws concerning purity with food, childbirth, stay away from lepers, right? And your body. So y'all follow me? 1, 2, 3, 4 under A. This is about ceremonial stuff. We don't have to worry about, not what we eat. And then B, a day of atonement. These are all just instructions. They're instructions after instructions after instructions. D, standards of the people. Number 1, sexual relationships, daily life, heinous, how do you say that? Heinous offenses. And then E, standards for the priest about offerings. Here you go. G, all the festivals, the Sabbath. We know that. What's the Sabbath? Saturday. Keep a holy day. That's in the 10 Commandments. We're still obligated to keep the Sabbath, or keep it at least in your mind, How about the Passover and unleavened bread? Y'all remember that was for a week. They couldn't eat leavened bread for a week. And all of that did was represent what? Y'all remember? To remember the Exodus. That was it. That's it. There's nothing to do with the yeast in the bread. It was just because that's what they didn't have time for it to rise. When he said, let's go, it's time to go. Look at number 3, the first fruits. This is like Thanksgiving, or what used to be Thanksgiving, I guess. They would gather all their harvest and give to God their first. Pentecost is 50. Penta is 50. That was 50 days. Trumpet. These are just different things. We're not obligated to do any of these. And then we have the laws concerning old bread and blasphemy, Sabbath year of Jubilee. So the Sabbath year was every 7th year. They had to take off and not do stuff. And then the Jubilee is not just a Ford tractor. That was every 50 years. They actually had to return stuff, like return land. Pretty big deal. And then a couple of more laws. So there's no reason we're going to go through all of these, because the majority of them do not apply to us. Y'all follow me? Now, there is something in here that we need to look at. So go to Leviticus chapter 4. And we're going to read 1 through 12. And it's in your notes here. So this, if you go back to... I'm sorry, let's do something different before we get to there. Let's go to 11. Go to chapter 11. We're just going to make fun of it for a minute. Go to chapter 11, verse 1. So Leviticus 11. And if you look in your notes in the index or the outline, you'll see that we're talking about food, right? So look at Leviticus 11. It says, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, verse 2, speak to the children. These are the animals which you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. Among the animals, whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hooves, and chewing the cud that you may eat. So I guess we're okay with cows, right? Cows eat cud. Nevertheless, verse 4, these you shall not eat. Among those that chew the cud, but have cloven, you can't eat. Can you eat camels or not? Okay, so no camels. Because it chews the cud, but doesn't have the right hoof, right? You can't eat a camel. Don't do that. Oh, and number 5, don't eat a rock hyrax. What is that? Is that like a Cornish hen? I mean, I don't know. A mountain goat. Okay, all right. Because it chews the cud but doesn't have the right shoes either. And number 6, don't eat a what? I got rabbit, hare. Don't eat hare. Yeah, you can't eat hare, but don't eat a rabbit either. Because it chews the cud, don't have the right kind of hoof. So you can't eat rabbit, you can't eat a goat or whatever that was. Oh, and here's number 7, my favorite. Can't eat a what? Pig. Remember that night I asked y'all, I said, are you sure Jesus fulfilled this stuff? Because right here, it says don't do it. And if you got any kind of doubt that Jesus didn't really fulfill the law, we're all in a bad spot, right? So are y'all absolutely sure it's okay to eat a pig? I mean, you would stake your salvation on it? You have, yeah, yeah. So no pigs. Oh, yeah, pigs are okay now, but not then. What did they do with them? Ride them around? What's the point of a pig then? Anyway, so y'all see there's these food laws. There's common animals, unclean animals, and all that stuff. Do y'all remember in the New Testament a story that has to do with exactly this little section? Can y'all think of a story in the New Testament? Not necessarily in the Gospels, but somewhere. Peter. What about Peter? Hey, what about it? Uh-huh. But how did God tell him it was okay to eat everything? It was in a dream. Yeah. So he was hungry and went on the roof to pray, wait for his wife to get finished with dinner or whatever. No. He was hungry, went on the roof to pray and fell into a trance and saw this big sheet come down and had all the unclean animals and God said, "Eat." And Peter said, "What? No, Lord. No, Lord. I don't eat no pigs." So, anyway, but the dream really wasn't about eating animals. It was about saving non-Jews. It was about preaching to Gentiles. And Peter goes later on and explaining that because Peter was a Mr. Jew all the way. Paul was the one that was more for the Gentiles, and him and Peter got at it a couple times, but Peter finally gave in. So it wasn't really about the animals, but it does talk about the whatever. It's funny. All right, let's go to chapter 17. Here's another one. Just a little tidbit. 17:10. 17:11. I don't know. 17 something. Let's look. So in your index, 17 has to do with laws concerning sacrificing. Okay. So in this section of the law, we're talking about sacrificing animals and the rules to do it. And if you start in verse 1, basically he's saying, if you sacrifice something out in the field, you better drag it over to the temple and give it to the priest, because we're not doing it on your own. You can't go out there and sacrifice it in the dirt and call it done. You can't worship God from your bass boat, right? So he's saying, don't do it. Drag it to the temple. You can't kill it out there and call it a sacrifice. And then he goes on and on about what to do with it. Look at verse 10. And whatever man of the house of Israel or of the strangers who dwell among you, who he eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut him off from among his people. Verse 11, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement. So what were these people doing, do you think? Drinking it, yeah. Mm-hmm. So they don't know. Maybe they're hungry and maybe it tastes good. I don't know. But God said, don't drink the blood. Why? It's special. It has the life in it, and I've made blood for atonement only. Remember that. Okay. Well, there is a group of people that won't allow to get blood transfusions because of this very verse, 17:11. And they refuse to get blood transfusions, and because their backup verse says, the Bible says, don't eat blood. Do you all think that's relatable? Or is that an application of that verse? Yeah, yeah. So sometimes we can really be messed up, can't we? We can really take things way out of context. Does the Bible say don't eat blood? Yes. But what is it talking about? Sacrifice. Well, yeah, drinking it or eating it. But it's talking about after you sacrifice an animal and things like that. Has nothing to do with medical today. Anyway, so sometimes you really gotta really think about. You can find verses in here that say anything, but you got to think about what they're talking about, right? So blood is special. I wouldn't advise drinking it. I think there isn't even a meal. Isn't there some kind of blood cottage cheese or something they make? What is blood pudding? Yeah, that I'm not sure I would eat that, right? But blood orange. What's that? An orange? Well, that ain't blood. That's it, blood sausage. That's what I was trying to think of. Ugh. But anyway, I'm not sure I would go down that road, right? Because that may be more applicable, but blood transfusion, that's a pretty big stretch. But people live and die by that fact. And that's not that's kind of a stretch. But anyway, so you can pull laws back. By the way, is that still an effect law for us today anyway as a Christian? Has nothing to do with us, does it? But we have Christians that apply that. And I don't, anyway, so think about these things as you're coming across it, or if you it has nothing to do with this. Jesus fulfilled that law. Well, if they refuse to eat blood, well, then they need to be having all kinds of stuff if they still think we're obligated to all of those laws. All right, y'all ready? Chapter 4. This is the instructions on sacrifice. If you look in your little index, the sin offering. I'm just going to read 1 through 12. Chapter 4, 1 through 12. So this was the rule. This was the law. This is you lived and died by these 12 verses. We laugh at them. We make fun of them. These people did not. They lived and died and killed each other over these 12 verses. Right? Okay. All right, so chapter 4, verse 1. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, okay, number verse 2. If a person sins unintentionally against any of the commandments of the Lord, which ones? Any of the commandments of the Lord, in anything which ought not to be done, and does any of them, okay, get ready. Verse 3, if the anointed priest sins, so that's the guy you went to for help, what's he doing? Sinning, because he's a person, he's a man. Bringing guilt on the people, here we go, here's your rule, then let him offer to the Lord for his sin, which he has sinned, a young bull without blemish as a sin offering. Here's how you do it. He shall bring the bull to the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord, lay his hand on the bull's head, and kill the bull before the Lord. Then the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and bring it into the tabernacle of meeting. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle the blood 7 times before the Lord in front of the in front of the veil of the sanctuary, number 7. And the priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of sweet incense before the Lord, which is in the tabernacle of meeting. And he shall pour the remaining of the blood of the bull at the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So he's really making a mess. Verse 8, he shall take from it all of the fat of the bull as the sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails and the fat which is on the entrails, the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them by the flanks, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys. I mean, we've got a biology course here. He shall remove, verse 10, as it was taken from the bull of the sacrifice of the peace offering, and the priest shall burn them on the altar of the burnt offering. Verse 11, but the bull's hide, can't put it on the wall, and all of its flesh, with its head and legs, its entrails and its offal. Verse 12, the whole bull he shall carry outside the camp to a clean place where the ashes are poured out and burnt on wood with fire, where the ashes are poured out and it shall be burned. I'm stopping right there because it just gets more and more. Crazy, isn't it? And why should you, what was the reason I had to do all of that? Which one? What would you have to do for an intentional one? God, y'all see? Okay, let's go back through it. Number 2, verse 2. Who should Moses speak to? Children of Israel. So we don't have a select group of people that only you have to do this. Who has to do it? Everybody. Which commandments should they worry about? All of them. Which ones? All of them. Man, I don't even know them all. And the last time I told the cop I didn't know that was a law, it didn't work, right? Yeah. Number 3, who else is accountable for these things? You may miss that, but if the anointed priest sins, so who else is accountable to him? The priest. Yeah. And what must the sinner offer? A young bull. Does anybody have any other translation besides a young bull, cow, or heifer, or something? I don't know. Big animal, large animal. And what must they do with it in verse 4? Kill it. Verse 5, who takes it? The priest. The anointed priest. Not just any priest, the one that had the right to do it. 6 and 7, what does he do with the blood? And I know I'm getting gross here, but we need to know. What does he do with the blood, 6 and 7? Finger paints it all over the place, doesn't he? Puts it on the altar, puts it on the horns. See, we didn't get all the description, but inside the tabernacle, he built all these things, and had the horns and all that. Anyway. And what does he do with the fat? Burns it. And what does he do with the rest of it? Where does he do with the rest? Get it out there. He didn't make a rug out of it and sell it. Put it on your walls in front of your fireplace. They had to get it out of there. So they were very, very, very strict and very precise. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to see that in just a minute. We're going to answer that. Why? What does he do with the blood? Verse 6 and 7. If you look at the verse 6 and 7, it says, the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times. You see that? I'm just telling you, he had to do a lot with it. I'm not teaching you how to do it. Right? And the priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of sweet incense. See, we skipped the instructions of how to build the altar of sweet incense, but it was in the temple. And then all the other parts. So yeah, a lot of stuff. So just picture what this would look like today. If we I'm thinking I'd be in the cow business. I'd be in the cattle business. I don't know. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. They all lived together at this point. They all lived together. They were all living together in a big tribe. God gave them the instructions. Right. How come they don't do it today? How come the Jews still don't do it today? Price of beef is too high. Y'all know why? They don't have a temple. Yeah. They're kind of in a holding pattern right now that they know this. And they're trying to get the temple back, of course, and that's why they're always fighting. But yeah, they don't have to do it because they don't have the temple. The temple's gone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Somewhere. No waste. No leftovers. Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it has to be in that place. So the portable tent where God resided, and God would tell them when to move it, the tabernacle, God resided in it, and he would tell them, okay, we're going to move, and he would go by cloud and fire, remember, and they would move. But see, then he instructed King David's son Solomon to build a temple. And once they built the temple, that's where it was. There was no more use for the portable temple, right? So that's where it is in Jerusalem. Yeah, and it's kind of got an intruder. So, yeah. There's only one wall left to the original temple, by the way. When the Romans came in the year 70, they wiped it out. Yeah. So anyway, it's not even there. There's nothing there. Yeah, Hebrews. So let's go to the back of the book, Hebrews. We'll go to chapter 9, and maybe we'll answer that question. Why the blood? Why? Right? And why do we not have to do it today? But let me tell you, if we did, we'd be set up, right? I mean, we got the pins, we got the arena, all Cowboy Church is ready to go. Yeah. I'm not sure what we would do with all the leftovers. Sir? Burn ban, yeah. Every day. Yes, ma'am. Every day, 24 hours a day. Yes, ma'am. I think they just killed them. Yeah. Or God's wrath burned them up. I mean, we could go in and look at all that, but it ain't pretty. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really understanding the unintentional thing, and I don't know, maybe someone had to point it out to them. Yeah, yeah. Or they did it anyway for their unintentionals. Who knows? But yeah. I'm not sure. You may not be guilty of this, but you're guilty of something. Yes. That's the way I felt about prison ministry. I'm innocent. No, you're not. Anyway, all right, Hebrews chapter 9. I'm going to read the whole chapter. I have time, and it's a great chapter, and I want you to think about what we just read, okay? Hebrews chapter 9. Everybody there? Okay. Who wrote the book of Hebrews? Paul. No. I believe Paul. One day, I'm going to win that bet. Huh? Prove it? Well, when I'm reading it, it just sounds like him. It's just him. Run-on sentences. All right, chapter 9. Then indeed, even the first covenant, First Testament, Old Testament, had ordinances of divine service and earthly sanctuary. Verse 2. For a tabernacle was prepared, the first part in which was the lampstand, the table, and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. Verse 3, and behind the second veil, the part of the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all. Verse 4, which had the golden censer, which is a bowl, and the ark of the covenant, overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that had the manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. And above it were the cherubim of glory, overshadowing the mercy seat. All of these details, all of these things, we cannot now speak in detail. But what is he describing? The old way, right? What Moses did. He's describing. He's saying, well, we'll get to that in a minute. Let me keep reading. Verse 6. Now when these things had been thus prepared, the priest always went into the first part of the tabernacle, performing the services. Verse 7, but into the second part of the high priest went alone, once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the people's sins committed in ignorance, unintentional sins. Verse 8, the Holy Spirit indicating this, that the way into the Holy of All was not yet made manifest while the tabernacle was still standing. It was symbolic for the present time, which is Jesus' time. That was symbolic for the present time in which both gifts and sacrifices are offered, which cannot make him who performed the service perfect in regard to the what? Conscience. Verse 10, concerned only with foods and drinks and various washings and fleshly ordinances imposed until the time of Reformation. Verse 11, but Christ came as a high priest of the good things to come, with the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is not of this creation. Verse 12, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with what? But with his own blood he entered the most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. Verse 13, for if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifies for the purifying of the flesh, if all that worked on the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? And for this reason, he is the mediator of the which covenant? The new covenant, by means of death for the redemption of the transgressions under the first covenant, that those who are called may receive the promise of the eternal inheritance. Verse 16, for where there is a testament or a law, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator, the writer, the put-togetherer. Verse 17, for if a testament is in force after men are dead, since it has no power at all while he lives, it only gets effect after the death. Verse 18, therefore not even the first covenant was dedicated without what? Blood. Remember, Moses took blood and sprinkled it over the book that day when he came down from the mountain. He says, not even the first covenant was dedicated without blood. Verse 19, for when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and goats with water, scarlet wool, and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people, saying, remember we said, Jesus said this too, this is the blood of the covenant which God has commanded you. What did Jesus say later? This is the cup of the what? New covenant. So Moses, 1,000,000 years ago, said this is a covenant blood of a book. Jesus later on says, I'm your new covenant. He's repeating the exact same words. 21. Then likewise he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. That's what we read in those 6 and 7, right? He got blood on everything in there. Verse 22, and according to the law, almost, here we go, here's your key. According to the law, almost all things are purified with what? Blood. And without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. Something has to die. Verse 23, therefore, it was necessary that the copies of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. Verse 24, for Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but he entered into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Verse 25, not that he should offer himself often, as the high priest enters every year with blood of another, but then he would have to he would have had to suffer often since the foundation of the world. But now, once at the end of ages, he has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And it is appointed for men to die once, but after this the judgment. So Christ was offered how many times? Once, to bear the sins of many. To those who eagerly wait for him, he will appear a second time, apart from sin, for salvation. Okay. So this is why we believe Jesus fulfilled the law. Let's go back to verse 5. Why couldn't they speak in detail? He's saying, he describes everything, and then in verse 5 he says, of these things we cannot speak in detail. Why? It wasn't there. Yeah, they weren't using it properly, and the tabernacle's gone. So he's just saying, I'm just quoting you what Moses had did. But this is what was supposed to happen. Okay? Verse 9 and 10. Why was the old way only symbolic? Look at 9. It was symbolic for the present time in which the sacrifices are offered. So how was the old tabernacle sacrifices symbolic of what's... Yeah, y'all see, it's the link. He's saying it was just a symbol. It was like a ring is a symbol. It was just a symbol of what Jesus is really going to accomplish. A temporary solution. All right. Verse 12. What did blood... Oh, I messed that verse up, that question up. Let me see what I was trying to ask. Oh, yeah, what blood... I put did too many times. What blood did Jesus enter with? His blood. What blood did the priest enter with? An animal's blood. The priest didn't use his own. So when the priest went in, he had the problem of covering their sins and his own. Remember, it says that. Jesus enters by his own blood. But something has to die before you can go in. Jesus didn't even get a pass. You see? He could have just walked in and said, this is my house, I don't need to die. But he didn't. Verse 13 and 14, was Jesus' sacrifice different than the goats and bulls? Yes. Verse 13 says, for if the blood of bulls and goats and ashes and all this stuff can purify the flesh, how much more do you think the Son of God's sacrifice can purify you? Y'all follow that? Right, yeah. How often does he have to do it? Once. Yeah. Look at verse 15, and this is the most important question you have to know and answer in your life. Verse 15. My question is, was Jesus' sacrifice, was it effective and was it sufficient? Let's read the verse 15. And for this reason, he is the mediator of the new covenant by means of death for the redemption of the transgressions, that's me, under the first covenant, that those who are called may receive the promise of the eternal inheritance. Was Jesus' sacrifice effective? Did it work? That's in your heart that you have to answer that question, right? Was it sufficient? Do you see the difference in those two questions? Do you know we can believe in the effective blood of Christ and we could say, Jesus died for my sins, Jesus died, and I can believe in it, but I'm just not sure if it was enough for me. You don't know what I've really done. Y'all see that? So it has to be effective. If you don't believe Jesus' blood is effective, you better go get you a cow and start killing it. Right? If you don't believe it was sufficient, you're not in a good spot. It's two different words. That's kind of like asking you, do you believe in the Bible? Yeah, I believe in the Bible. Is it sufficient? Well, it's pretty good. No, that's not what I asked. Y'all see the difference? Is it sufficient? Is it without error? Well, I don't know. There may be some messed up stuff in there. Which part is that? So is it sufficient enough for me to live by? Is it effective? Is it whole? Is it without error? Is Jesus' blood efficient? Effective, not efficient. Effective? And is it sufficient? Because if you still have a doubt, sir, that is you. That is the definition of if you believe in Jesus Christ or not. Do you trust what he says is true? When he says, if you call on my name, you will be saved. Do you trust that? Because if not, you're wasting your time. Right. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. Yeah, and that's a pretty true statement. I would say it's a high probability, but not a promise. Yeah. So look at 18. What was the First Testament dedicated with? Blood. What's the New Testament dedicated with? Somebody's blood. Different bloods. Mm-hmm. Verse 22, here's your key. This answers why these things had to happen. Verse 22, what must happen for the remission of sins? Shedding of blood. Something has to die. Remember, blood is the life. Life. Blood is life. Blood is life, and that's why you're not supposed to drink it. It's only made for sacrificing. So when you mess up, something has to die. Simple as that. There's no other way around it. God's justice demands it. If that makes you mad, that makes you like, I don't believe that, well then you're stopped right there. Because then you have no need of anything else. Some people disagree with that. They'll say, well, I couldn't deal with a God like that. I understand. I want a happier God. Well, go find him. I don't know what to tell you. This is the true and living God that I worship. And this is what he says. Verse 23 through 26, was Jesus a copy of something else? Well, I put that wrong, right? He wasn't a copy. He was the real thing. What was the other thing? That was the copy symbol. Yeah, I didn't mean to say Jesus was a copy, right? And does he have to come back every year? No. So was it sufficient? Yes. And verse 27 through 28 is really neat. Think about that. Who will Jesus appear a second time to? I don't say us. What does it say? It's very clear who he's going to appear to. That's what it says, yeah. It says, to those who do what? Eagerly wait for what? Him. He will come back for, right? And it's not going to be about sin. It's only going to be for what? Salvation. So that's really what salvation means. Salvation isn't something that, well, you can argue that. It's not something that, it's something that's going to happen, and it does. So it's three parts. It does and did and is going to. Anyway, I don't want to go down that road. But anyway, so let's go back to verse 27. Who will Jesus appear a second time to? To those who what? Eagerly wait for him. Can you be a Christian in today's world and you're not really eagerly waiting for Jesus? Yeah, so that really shows you your heart, or it really shows you something that you should think about. Do you eagerly wait, Do you read the last sentence of the Bible that says, "Come quickly, Jesus"? Are you like those parables where the people get caught with, can't get back in the party and all that kind of stuff? Do you eagerly await for Jesus? Or is this just a hobby? Or is this just something that you want to tag along with? Because people do Christianity all kinds of reasons. Do you eagerly await for him, to see him? Or is this just something that I like to do and read about, So these are very hard questions that I've faced myself, that I've had to answer over time. And number 15 on Hebrews 9 is the key question. And you have to make that solid. If you have those doubts, if you have any kind of, I'm just not sure if it was effective. There's a group in today's world that's kind of gaining popularity. They're called Messianic Jews. And so they still are kind of holding on to that Old Testament stuff and then still following Jesus. And to me, that's kind of saying that Jesus wasn't effective. You know, like I'm not into their deal, but that's just kind of like, is Jesus, is he effective or not? Is he sufficient or not? You know, just think about that. Not for that other religion, but I'm just saying in your life, like, is it effective? Was it sufficient? Is the Bible sufficient for you? Or is it just something that I really hope works? I just hope it works, you know?
Eagerly await is hard because the human part of me wants to see the babies grow up. I want to see, there's all these things that I want to see. And it's like, if he comes today, then I miss out on that.
Who said you're going? Or you'll miss them.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
So it's like it's hard sometimes to think, okay, Lord, come today. Now if I'm having a bad day, yeah, I say come today.
Yeah, I know
But,
it.
you know, it's like, I want to, there's a song, I want to go to heaven. I just don't want to do it right now.
Right now. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
I know that, but it's like you just have this picture in your mind of what life will be, and it's like it would all be cut short. And I'm still afraid we're going to be Stepford wives. So.
It's not going to be exactly what you thought. Yeah. So that is our flesh. You know, we're flesh and spirit, I guess. And so our flesh likes our life, and we like the world, and we like to live here. And then our spirit yearns for something better. And so we're always torn. Yeah, we're always torn. This is not our home, but our flesh is home. But our spirit is not our home. And so that's why we're always like, ugh. I'm supposed to rejoice at the funeral, but I can't, you know?
Yeah.
And that's hard. Well, guys, did y'all think we could do Leviticus in one night? We did it. What's the next book? Y'all don't even know. Numbers. Think we can do it in one night? Probably not, because we'll start moving the 10 around a little bit. Now, we're not going to go step by step from Moses, but we're going to kind of hit the highlights of the narrative. When we get to Joshua, when we get to the river and we start attacking and you know, that's fun. But in the meantime, we're just wandering around in the desert. And I don't want to spend 40 years reading about 40 years. Okay? Anyway. Well, guys, let's call it a night. And Saturday, having the parade. We're not having a float, but we are having hamburgers and stuff after the float. There's a little sign-up sheet. If you want to come, let me know how many so we can get enough hamburgers. And I guess we'll start cooking at 6 and be ready at 6:30, so when y'all are done. But anyway, we'll have s'mores, we'll have a fire and hamburgers and hang out. So I've heard that rumor. I'm not sure how we can do that. But if you can hook up with a friend, good luck. In front of the Hammett's office, Mr. Hammett said he would reserve us a spot, and
He'll lay down in front.
they say it leaves the lake at 5:30, and it's supposed to be at the square about 6. So yeah, we'll all go to Hammett's house. Make sure it's unlocked. I mean, you're off. Make sure it's unlocked so we can use the bathroom. So yeah, hopefully y'all can hook up with some folks, but I can't reserve a spot for 100 people. Sorry. Anyway. All right. But we will get together Saturday night, and if you don't make it, it's fine. We'll see you Sunday. Do what? Yeah, I was wondering why he's just staring at me. You better turn that thing on once in a while. Never know what I'm saying. All right. Well, let me pray.